the London Book Fair 2022 and the Writers' Summit. Since 2020, I've been dreaming about attending those events, hoping that the world would allow such a thing to happen once again, and it finally did. But why was I so eager to attend? It's not as if that's a festival with a lot of entertainment, but it's because of this future that I want for myself. I want to write stories every day. I want this to be part of my every living day. But I am not naive. I have to pay my bills. And I know that if I want this to be a reality, I must insert myself into an industry with its habits and its rituals. If this is your first time here in the channel, just know that this is not the type of content I normally make. This is a channel about extracting narrative lessons from great stories, from books and games and movies. But today I'm going to do something different. I think it's such an opportunity for me to have attended this event, and a lot of people showed interest in the things that I would learn and I could share. Not only that, but the truth is that I attended those events because of you folks. Because I attended the London Book Fair with a press pass that says YouTuber, which is so cool. So this is also a video of me trying my best to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you so much for giving me this space where I can send them an email saying like, I'm an influencer. Can I get a pass, please? And they say, yeah, sure. So here's a video with the insights I captured at the fair. Those are not really my ideas, just my curation. When I'm sharing my ideas here, I'll be very clear. When I don't, just know that I heard that in some talk or by exchanging with the people who I met over there or publishing professionals. I tried to select the pieces of information that I don't usually find online. There would be no point in repeating something that has been said 1,000 times. So this is not an extensive guide, but more of a collection of insights from the London-based publishing industry, which might be interesting because most of the information we find here on YouTube is very United States based. So London might have a different opinion on some things. I certainly felt so. Those are the topics I want to talk about here in this video. You will find that this timeline has been separated in chapters, and in the description below you'll find the timestamps for each of the themes if you're just interested in some of them and not all of them. And to the people who are just uninterested in publishing a book and that's just not your gig, I'm sorry. It's just that the few people who are interested in publishing that I might have some sort of a golden nugget of knowledge for these people, and I know they are a smaller segment of my audience, but I really want to benefit them this time around. So I hope you can forgive us for having this conversation, and if you are planning on publishing your book, I hope I can provide some value. Without further ado, let's go. Most of the advice I find about, connecting with the right literary agent for you is very platform based. Look for agents in those platforms where everybody is indexed and everything. But the advice that I heard at the London Book Fair was completely different from that, and it was interesting because it sounds like a very specific thing to do, but I heard the same piece of advice in two different talks from two different people, disconnected entirely, and I was like, that might be standard practice here. Also, let me point out that this might work much better if you work in London, or at least in an English-speaking country. I don't know how this goes in other countries. I live in Germany. I don't know how applicable that is, but let me just tell you what they told me. Go to a bookshop and imagine where your book will be placed. This is crucial. This is so important for so many things. I can't stress this enough. Once you're there, go to the particular part of the bookshop that your book would be placed, as this here, this section here, next to that and that and that, and start opening the books there and checking the acknowledgements page. Right at the beginning, this is where, if everything went okay, if everything went swimmingly, the author will have put the name of their literary agent. And there's 3 versions of that. The first version is just a name among a sea of names. This is alright, I guess. Not very encouraging. The second thing that you might encounter is the name of the agent and the title. Oh, that person, my agent. This is very neutral. Also, not a good sign, but not a bad sign. And then there's the one that you're looking for, which is the author saying, that person, my agent, who was so important for this book to exist in the world, and I'm so thankful for the brilliant work they did. That's the agent you want. That one. If there's a note like that, you have a decent idea that working with this agent will be a pleasant experience. And the fact that you found the book in the bookshop is a proof of record. You're literally interacting with the positive result of an agent's work if you look for the agent in an offline, in a real world store. Agents might be looking for all sorts of things. It's a complex business with a lot of detail and minutia, but during the Writers' Summit it was explained in a way that I never heard before and that I found useful and insightful. So here's what they talked about. When you query an agent, when you send a query letter, they are generally responding to your query in 3 different ways. As a reader, as a business person, and as a colleague. All agents are readers. All of them. So you're trying to connect with them using your narrative power. And this is the part of the query we hear the most when you look online for advice. Yeah, of course, you need to put a very effective hook, something that will catch their attention, something that will show them what is the sort of story that you're talking about, and hopefully provoke the curiosity that will make them ask for more. Like, oh, that's interesting. Give me more of that. But that is not enough. This agent also needs to be confident enough that they know how to sell what you're offering. Maybe somebody who sells adult fantasy does not know how to sell YA fantasy because the publishing environment is different and they just don't know how to do it. So it's not really about your literary value here. The literary value came before when they engage with you as readers. Here is more about the opportunities. Oh, should I take this client? Will I waste my time? Will I waste their time? Will this be a very easy win? Do I know exactly who's gonna want that story just by reading this paragraph? Those decisions are much colder than the first ones. And lastly, they respond to you as colleagues in the sense that, hey, if they really start engaging with you professionally, this is a relationship that might last for decades. So things like respect, even niceness, care, attention, those are all there, even in your first query letter. And really, there's some sort of a running joke in the publishing industry. People send query letters and they spell the names of the agents wrong. This seems to be very common and it's absolutely unacceptable. You're trying to almost professionally marry that person. This is a relationship that might last for a long time. And of course, you want to start that with the right foot. You want to show that you care. You care enough to spell their names right. Like, what the hell, man? I don't think there's anything revolutionary in what I just said. But now if I look at a query letter on Reddit and I sort of look at it with those 3 lenses, it's been useful. It's interesting. Okay, so in the topic of query letters, let's talk about a very particular bit of the query letter that is generally considered optional, but a lot of agents don't think so. They think it's totally necessary, which is comp titles. It's a way for you to compare your work in progress with other books that already exist out there. The way that it was explained to me, and it's normally explained online, is just trying to put your book in the middle of two books, or is this book meets this book, or is this author meeting this author? And I always had a little bit of a bad feeling about this, like I'm boxing my book under those two books, and I don't know how this will be perceived. I don't exactly believe that my book is in the middle of two existing books. This is not how it goes in my head. The Writers' Summit changed my whole view on comp titles, and now I'm even excited to look for the right comp title for me. And let me get my notes. So what I wrote down here that James said was, when you're comparing your book to others, use finesse. Don't just say that your book is like something. I want to know why. Yeah, that sounds cool. It's not saying, oh, it's this book meets this book. It is saying it's the style of this protagonist meets this style of plot twist. That stimulates my imagination. This setting, but with this style of prose that I can work with. By the way, a lot of the information that I'm sharing here came from this one talk by James Spackman, who has this whole company about helping people to query and pitch better their books. You should follow him on Twitter. No, he didn't pay me anything for me to mention him here. He was nice on Twitter though. I added him. He was like, yeah, hey, how you doing? Cool guy. But the most useful thing that James Spackman brought to the Writers' Summit was this stellar example of a query letter. A real life example, a real letter that was sent and was offered representation. And he put this text on screen, and I'm gonna put here on your screen with a better, easier to read font. And he broke it down in its different bits and different energies, and I'm gonna try to do the same here with you. Right, so this letter starts with the basics, with the crucial bits of information that every single query letter must contain. It says that it's seeking representation, it gives the book's working title, the word count, and the genre. Those are unavoidable, so you might as well put them at the top. Just after that, it sprinkles a little bit, just a little bit of narrative, saying that it's set in 19th century London, which makes sense for a historical novel. If that was a fantasy novel, here's where you put that it was a portal fantasy. If it was a sci-fi novel, this is where you would put that it's a sci-fi about time traveling. Not a piece of information that defines the whole work, but it starts to give it a little bit of color. The second bit of the first paragraph is entirely dedicated to homework. I have researched your agent, and I believe that we can connect because of that. In this case here, a client of such agent is mentioned, and it proves to the agent that not only this author researched them, but also the author was capable of making bridges with what they found out of this research. The second paragraph is entirely dedicated to the narrative pitch. The part of the query letter where the author is trying to show the agent that their story has literary value, that it is instigating, that it is engaging. And of course, every single narrative pitch will look different from one another. Your story has nothing to do with this story. Of course, you're gonna build this part of your letter in your own unique way. But still, I think there is something to be learned here. First of all, it is clear that this is a character-focused story. Every ounce of this narrative pitch oozes character. And you don't have to do the same. Maybe your story is more world-building focused, or maybe your story is more plot focused. But here is a good example on how the main characteristic, the focus of the story, is incredibly clear. And you should try to do the same, whatever your focus is. Second, I think there's something to be said about the length of this paragraph, and yes, it is the biggest part of the query letter, as it should, but it is not overwhelmingly big. It's still condensed, bite-sized, it can still be read very quickly, and it conveys everything this story needs to convey. Now let's analyze it in its different parts and segments. It starts with a hook, and you can even argue that here we have two different hooks. The first one being the historical hook. Yes, it's set on this particular time, and because it is historical fiction, and because the agent works with historical fiction, they will know there's a certain subset of the audience that is looking for a particular time. They enjoy 19th century. So that is a sort of a secondary hook, and then there's the real star, the thing that makes the hook shine, which is the dichotomy between those two words that just shouldn't normally be connected. This is what provokes the curiosity. This is what makes the reader continue reading. Exactly what a hook should do. Then we have a chunk of setting. And perhaps this word setting would normally put you in a place of world building or political landscape, but in this case here, because the novel is so character focused, the setting is emotional. We're creating an emotional landscape, and this is where the rest of the story is going to sprout from. Just after that, we have a moment of status quo. This is who our hero is before they embark on their hero's journey. This is the very start, before the first step into adventure. And it ends with adversity. This is how the plot is going to move forward. This is where the obstacles are going to come from. And you can notice that even in this last sentence that is about plot, it's still very character focused. The third paragraph starts with something that we already mentioned earlier in the video, the business bit. And here, the author did exactly what was recommended to me by so many people in the London Book Fair. The author shows where this book would be positioned in a bookstore. The agent already knows more or less the audience. The agent might even know which publisher would be interested in a book that shares characteristics with this book. This is infinitely useful, and it shows that indeed the author did their homework. The second sentence of this paragraph here is interesting. It's something I don't think I've ever heard before. James mentioned that it's useful, it's a positive, that you add your references as a reader to your agent, so that they can have a more 3D version of your inspirations and your references. Don't forget that every single agent is also a reader and might connect with you in this aspect as well. Last paragraph is an About Me section. And the advice here is to add every single item that might validate your writing. So here we find studies in creative writing, shortlisting for short story competitions, which is great because it proves that somebody from a jury found this writing worthy. And of course, it doesn't prove that you write well, but it gives a little bit of validation that you're not completely lost in what you're doing. This very last bit here is interesting. James said that there are many agents who don't really like the personal stuff mixed in the query letter. He personally doesn't mind, but a lot of agents do. But it was done in a very subtle way here. It's at the very end, it's very small, it's just one detail, and it might sound interesting. It is so small that it wouldn't really bother an agent who don't care about this sort of thing, but it is specific enough that some agent who really appreciate classical music, who was just listening to a string quartet while reading this query letter, could could have a positive opinion on the end of that. So it adds just a little bit of flavor, and he found that really positive. Let me remind you that the pieces of advice I just shared here are not really my own. They were taken directly from the notes I frantically scribbled during James's presentation on the Writers' Summit, where he analyzed exactly this query letter. And of course, I will never analyze it as well as him, but I hope I brought some value here. I hope I wrote down at least half of the things that he mentioned about this one exemplar query letter. I want to take a second to thank everybody who gave me the permission to use this text here. James, the author, the agent, everybody who was involved. They asked me to put a couple of links in the description, and if you want to keep on exploring this knowledge, everything will be below. So that letter worked. And of course, there's not only one way to do this. Your query letter might look different from this. But I thought that having just one example so neatly packed, it seemed to have everything. There's a little bit of that, a little bit of that, a bunch of that. I like to look at the sizes of things in this query letter. Oh, how big is this paragraph? How much time you spend on this and this and that? And I might do things differently. I probably will. But I just find it reassuring and useful to have this one really great example. And now shifting to a bit more of a personal experience, but still in the topic of querying and pitching. In his first talk of the day, James talked a bunch about query and what should be in your letter. And then he invited the participants to to write their own elevator pitches, not a full query letter, but like a 2-sentence quick pitch of the books. And he said that in his second talk of the day, the same afternoon, a couple of hours later, he would analyze those pitches. And of course I had to send mine. The truth is that I didn't show up empty-handed. I knew this talk was going to happen with the pitches and everything. It was part of the program. So I have brought 2 different versions of my elevator pitch in different sizes. But after listening to James talk and after a very insightful conversation I had with a writer and literary agent who was there, Naz. Thank you, Naz. That was super cool. I needed that talk. I decided to change everything. So this is what I submitted. 3 art students enroll under an unorthodox class taught in reality-bending landscapes inside their teachers' minds as they lucid dream together. The Fire Bazaar is a 90,000-word speculative fantasy novel heavily inspired by Hayao Miyazaki's wondrous worlds, and that I hope will sit next to Paulo Coelho in a bookstore. This is my book, folks. This is where my imagination has been living for the past 3 years. This is the conflux of all my creativity. This is the best idea I ever had in my life. Welcome to the Fire Bazaar. Over 95 pitches were sent that day, so I didn't want to keep my hopes up, but in the end, mine was selected at the very end when there was not a lot of time left, but it was selected and it showed up and I was ready. I had my phone ready to record the moment when James analyzed and critiqued my pitch. And here's what he said.
I think the concept is really strong, and I think that the person who wrote this is rightly focused on getting the concept across first, and then a really, quite bold but kind of reasonable combination of inspiration and aspiration. That was good.
Oh my god, it's hard for me to explain how proud I am of this, because I had just spent 40 minutes watching this man roast a bunch of pitches. Not roasting in a mean way, but there was always negative comments here and there, like, oh, that's cool, but this is off-putting, I wouldn't take that one, and this needs work. And it comes to me, and it's all positive. He's like, this is good, this is also good, very good, next. Oh my god. I'm feeling it all over again. My god, did my heart jump that moment? Did my heart jump? I'm very pleased. I think I did a good job. Thank you again, James and Nas, for having coached me into this, because I'm just so proud. And hey, here's an applied lesson. Miyazaki is clearly my main reference. You folks who follow the channel know that, but I can't imagine myself entering a bookstore and go and grab Miyazaki because he's a filmmaker. So I was forced to imagine myself in this bookshop. And which book did I go? Where would I go in this bookshop? And hey, maybe Paulo Coelho is not perfect, but I wouldn't be too far away. So that has been really enlightening, and just learning this lesson and immediately applying it, I already am harvesting this crop. Pretty cool. I had a lot of fun. Now let's go for another topic. There was a lot of discussion about this one question. Do you need an author platform? Do you need to be there on social media, engaging every day and building a relationship with your audience and spend your hours, your time and your attention doing this frequently? The short answer is no. Immense asterisk. First of all, I don't think that's a good question. Of course you don't need that. You also don't need to make a living out of your writing. You can be perfectly happy just writing for fun. And if you want to make a living, how is this living gonna look like? What's your cost of living? What are your ambitions? How much do you want to invest? How much time every week, every month do you want to invest in this? So I think a different question, more in the lines of how useful would an author platform be in your context? A better question. Is it worth the investment, the attention, the time? How much investment? How much attention? How much time? How much do you give before you start getting something out of that? But anyway, back to the original question. Do you need an author platform? Here's the condensed conclusion. From all the talks I watched about this, there was a bunch of talks about this. If you are among the 0.001% best writers in a big enough audience niche, you don't need to worry about platforms. Your writing being superb as it is, you will dominate the scene. You don't need to worry. The first few reviews that come from your book will be just shocked on how good it is, and then the second batch of reviews will be shocked again, and then the third batch of reviews will also think you are spectacular because you write so well. But the niche needs to be big enough. If you are the absolute best writer in environmentalist Japanese-inspired vampire YA, it will not do the trick. You need to be the crème de la crème in YA fantasy, or self-help books about making money, or crime thrillers. It needs to be a big audience. If you're that good, then please don't worry about author platforms. This is the worries of us mortals. You're precious. You will succeed no matter what the hell you put out there because you are that good. But there's a chance that, hey, you're good. I'm not saying you're bad. You're good. You have a good story, a good concept, interesting characters. There is an audience out there that would definitely consider your book their favorite book. But you don't happen to be enlightened like these people. Then you would benefit greatly from an author platform. So, do you believe you are the top of the top of the top? If you do, forget about the platform. If you don't, if you think like, I'm good, I just need to reach the people who will write like this book more than anything. If you think like that, then start building your platform today. Hey, Jorian from the future here. I forgot to say something important in the original recording of this video. Something that was mentioned a couple of times is that you might be at the right place at the right time. For example, you just launched your book about Vikings, and at the same time a new series about Vikings and a new game about Vikings get a lot of attention, and this buzzword becomes much bigger than what it was before, and suddenly your book is selling very well because this audience is very engaged, very activated. So yes, this might happen, but it's outside of your control, and more often than not, this will not happen. So this is not something that authors can count on, but it exists. Okay, so let's assume that, like me, you think you're good and that you have a good story to tell, but you don't think you were drowned in a cauldron of magic writing potion when you were a kid, that you're not selected by the gods of writing, and you would like to build a platform to increase your chances. Which platform to choose? That was a topic also discussed in a couple of places over there. And I've got terrific news for you. Anywhere will do. Agents and publishers, they will not care if you use Twitter or YouTube or Clubhouse. You can even use a strange platform like Pinterest was mentioned in one of the talks. Apparently it's very good for people making cookbooks. Okay. The agents and the publishers, they don't care where you are. The only thing that they care is that there's a group of people paying consistent attention to you. That's what they want. This is what the business is about. It's not about any particular platform. The general advice here is, hey, build a platform where you like to hang out online for fun, in your spare time. What is the online place that you really like to engage with? And well, in my case, it's YouTube. And here I am. I spend a lot of time watching YouTube videos. I just love this thing. So I decided to start a YouTube channel. But hey, maybe YouTube is not your thing. Maybe you like to spend some time on Twitter or anywhere really. Just start there. Build a platform, whatever you like to be, because you're gonna have to be there a lot, honestly. And that's a grim prospect if you were forced to engage with a platform you dislike or that you find boring. But if you were already having fun before, it will be much easier for you to channel this fun into interesting content, into interesting things that you tell people. It's good advice. Another really interesting talk I went to was about making money with your writing. That one was packed. That one has a lot of people. And I was very happy because this one talk had Juliet E. McKenna, who's a really renowned fantasy writer. I was fanboying. She had like hatchet earrings. Oh, she's so cool. And this is what I learned. You might one day be one of those authors that make ridiculous amounts of money. But most authors never do. And especially at the beginning, they don't do it. Most professional authors have what they called in this talk a portfolio career. It basically means that you have multiple sources of income, and the sales of your books is just one of them. Portfolio careers can look vastly different, and there's no golden rule here. It depends on your skill set and the opportunities in the area where you live, and what languages you speak, and so many other factors. But whatever your context is, I think it's just very useful to approach your career with this mentality. You can make more informed decisions. Oh, how will this new project that I'm thinking about interact with the rest of my portfolio? How much time will it take? How much time will I have to take away from other things that are generating this or that amount of money? I just think it's also more realistic to approach things that way. Just thinking that your book sales might be even the main source of your income, but perhaps not the only one. There's something that Juliet said during that same talk kept me wondering. She mentioned that one of the items in her portfolio is that she's sometimes hired by big IPs, big brands, to write their official novels. Like Warhammer 40k might hire her to write a piece of their official lore. And she said that the money that comes from this is fixed, so she doesn't get royalties, she just pay a fee. But she especially likes to do it because it puts her name as the author in front of a lot of people who might enjoy her whole body of work. So she thinks it's a good deal, especially because she's getting money out of it. But here's what I got out of this comment. You might think of your portfolio as different projects that are bringing you money, but you can also extrapolate that and think of your portfolio are different projects that are bringing you multiple resources, money being one of them, but also buzz, as Juliet mentioned, being another, or enjoyment, or a better mental health. Those different projects don't have to bring money necessarily. Money definitely needs to be in the system if you want to sustain yourself, but just think of the other resources that you're getting out of all of those experiences. With that in mind, you can look at your portfolio and start to notice that some items can boost other items. For example, giving a TED Talk that gets really famous and it's shared millions of times with the world. It's a great thing that you can do for your portfolio. You will put your name out there even though you were not really paid for it. Here is where I think the importance and the relevance of an author platform really goes up. Because yeah, sure, writing for this big IP or giving this TED Talk might bring a lot of eyeballs and attention to your work. Fair enough, of course. But those activities are not really optimized for that. They happen to bring people to you. But if you build an author platform in the big online platforms like YouTube, the whole system, the platform is designed to bring that attention to you. As long as you're good enough, as long as you can keep people engaged, it is in the best interest of the platform to get your audience to you. This is what the platform does. It optimizes this bridge building between you and your audience. It increases your audience. It gives your audience more opportunities to interact with you. And if you're good enough at it, it also pays you. It pays to be an Instagrammer, it pays to be a YouTuber. It's not crazy to imagine that an author platform will boost every single other item of your portfolio. Certainly, it's easy to imagine that it will help you sell books, but it also might open opportunities for you that wouldn't be there if you didn't have that buzz resource that you've been building online. Small wonder that it looks like some agents are almost requiring authors to have this sort of platform, just because it's really useful in the long run. Okay. Well, give me a second now. Let me talk about an idea, not something that I heard during the fair, but something that popped up in my mind just after the event when I was, just processing all of that information. I occupy an interesting position in this discussion. I've been doing YouTube for almost a decade, since I used to look like this, and I shrieked a lot at the camera in Portuguese. It was a thing. There was a lot of screaming. I understand YouTube content and YouTube business way better than I understand the publishing industry. But now that I'm starting to explore the latter, I'm really seeing how useful this here will be in the long run for me. And being in the middle of those two worlds gives me a vantage point. I can see things that you can only see if you understand enough of those two universes. So for example, while I'm at the London Book Fair, I consider this YouTube channel here my author platform. But in my mind and in my heart, this is not an author platform. This is my YouTube channel. I would be here anyway, even if I was not planning on publishing this book one day. I would be here because I want to be here. And this attitude helps me create better content, helps me have more fun when I record those videos for you. It just makes this author platform a better author platform. And that's the key, just changing the name, not seeing it in that way. I don't feel ready to talk about that yet. This channel is way too small for me to give advice on anything, really. But hey, maybe one day when I have 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 subscribers, I might come back to this idea and I don't know, maybe open a Kickstarter. This has the smell of Kickstarter to me. I'm not sure how big of an audience there would be for something like that, because I can't talk about social media. I can only talk about this, YouTube. I understand YouTube. I have no idea how Instagram works. But I could give it a shot at some point. What do you think? Please write me a comment. I would be really interested in hearing your opinions about this idea, because it's still half formed in my mind. Anyway, this is the London Book Fair. Spinning my business gears. Let me take this opportunity and let's talk about the fair itself. Big question. Should you go to the London Book Fair? Is it worth your time? Is it worth your money? In this channel here, I make content for people who are interested in writing. So I think it's safe for me to assume that there are writers in my audience. So if you are a writer, you probably shouldn't go to the London Book Fair. I had a different impression of this event. I thought it would be more catered to authors, maybe not exclusive for authors, but there would be something there. And I think a lot about this opinion came from the fact that there was a place in the conference called the Authors HQ, which, you know, denoted that there would be a program for writers. But when I got there, it was a minuscule stage at the very back of the children's book session. Maybe 100 people fit there, probably not much more than that, or maybe not even that. And this Authors HQ, fine, they had a couple of good talks, but it was mostly Amazon just doing their best to make sure that the entirety of the self-publishing industry just depends on their service completely. Of course, the whole thing was sponsored by Amazon, and they decided who was going to talk, and it was mostly self-publishing. And yes, get Amazon, we're great. Never think about other services, just hire us. There was no author's lounge, nowhere for you to hang out and grab a coffee with your peers. There's no such thing. And it took me most of the fair to finally understand what was the whole shebang, what was the whole deal of the event. But on my last day, I met Jasmine. She's a sci-fi writer, and this is how we connected. She's also a Hugo nominee, goddamn. Her writing is very world-building heavy. It's the sort of stuff we like in the channel. So I will link her work below, and I encourage you to check it out. She's gonna be a big deal, this girl, I'm telling you. But she's not only a writer, she's an editor. She's been working in the publishing industry for years and years and years, I think 10 years, something like that. And she's a London Book Fair veteran. We were chatting about the fair, and there was this moment that she pointed at a particular segment of the fair, and she told me, this is where 99% of the action happens. Here, this is where the magic happens. Agents meeting publishers back to back, one after the other, from morning till 6 p.m, 10-minute meetings, one after the other, trying to sell their books, trying to sell your books, writers. This is where it happens. The London Book Fair is the absolute worst place on the planet for you to try and find an agent, because this is an agent's most busy day of the year. And this Selling the books to the publishers, right there, is what gets them paid. Is what gets everybody paid. So do not bother them. Get out of their way. Bring them coffee. If you're a writer not looking for an agent, but looking for other writers to connect, yeah, sure, you can meet other writers. I met Jasmine and other writers, but the place is not designed for that. It's not optimized for that. Listen, I'm an extroverted guy. I'm very extroverted. And even me, I had troubles because, starting conversations in narrow corridors. And when we finally got to the networking drinks on the second day, after half an hour, security was like, oh no, you have 2 minutes to go. It's just not made for those connections. Alas, being a writer or not, if you are looking for a job in the publishing industry, this is a great place to be. Everybody's there. Now, how about that smaller side conference on the first day, the Writers' Summit? This one's destined for writers, right? Should you attend that one? First of all, this is an event for people who are in the middle of their journey, not at the beginning. So, have you been writing for 2 years? If so, yeah, there might be something there for you. For example, the majority of the insights I brought to this video here didn't come from the London Book Fair where I spent 2 days. They came from the Writers' Summit, and I spent a single day, but it was just more catered for an audience like me. So I can't deny that I learned a bunch, but here's the second question. Do you earn enough so that £250 plus traveling costs, perhaps, depending on where you live, will not hurt your finances so much? Folks, I don't live in Rio de Janeiro anymore. I live in Berlin, and still, I don't pay this amount of money for anything. There's nothing, no event that would be that expensive. Fine, London is more expensive, fair enough, but wow! I think I was the youngest person in that room, and honestly, the absolute only reason why I was there is because you granted me this power. You bestowed me with the power of the press pass. Thank you. I love you. It's true that the Writers' Summit also gives you the opportunity to have one-on-ones with agents, a very direct connection with agents that it's not very common in the industry. So maybe if your dream agent will be there, somebody who's really interested in querying directly, then it might be a good investment. It depends. But £250? Really? I thought the event was cool, but this price is unjustifiable. So that covers the big topics, the big stuff. But I have a couple of tips and tricks and cheat codes that I learned along the way that don't deserve a full topic, but I thought it could be useful. And hey, if you're still here, you're great. Thank you for accompanying me in this long publishing journey. Let's give you some useful information. Number one, I saw 3 different industry professionals agree in different moments of the conference. You can query a work that's been self-published. And I saw even one of them, an agent, saying like, yeah, I love to see that. I love to see this person is already capable of selling without me. And then we're teaming together to get it even further in the journey, which is something that makes sense to me. But that is very different from the advice I found online. This also might be a difference between the UK and the US, because most of the publishing advice that I find online comes from the US. It might be a British thing, that might be the market changing. I don't know what was that, but 3 different people saying like, yeah, I would accept that, of course. Novellas. This underappreciated length of a body of writing work apparently can make really decent money with self-publishing. How about that? Here's an interesting perspective that nobody had given me before. The reason why authors pitch the agents in this saturated, quick way, this one paragraph that needs to sell the whole idea of the book, it's because agents need to do the exact same with the publishers. In those 10-minute long meetings in which they're gonna pitch 17 books, they're gonna perform exactly the same act. So they want to know that this enchantment is possible very quickly, because this is what they're gonna have to sell. There's a lot of writers who are really averse to the idea of an author platform. They hate the very thought of it. And even among the people who are not averse, most times, they're not very skilled at it. So if you master the basics, not the advanced stuff, the basics, and you just keep at it, hey, you might end up very quickly rising to the 5% top author platform people, just because of everybody else's negligence. You should query in small batches, from 5 to 10 query letters at a time. This way, if your query letter has some sort of a structural problem, you won't have sent this one to the entirety of the publishing industry. So you can test it out. And I heard that you should aim really high, start with your dream agents, and once you send those 5 query letters, count 8 weeks. And after 8 weeks, you look like, okay, let's reevaluate. Where am I? Did anybody reply? What did they say? And then you continue and maybe send another batch. Let's say you have an author platform and you decide to add that to your query letter, which you should. You should. Be ready for the agent to ask you back a picture of your dashboard to evaluate your level of engagement, which is great news if you've been building like a true relationship with your audience, and it's horrible news if you bought clicks. I said this before, I'll say it again. There's apparently a lot of people who send query letters and spell the names of the agents wrong. Do not do this, okay? If an agent requests your manuscript, send them in a Word file rather than a PDF, because there's a decent chance they would like to read it in their Kindles. And Kindles are not really good at PDFing. And that is all I got for this video. Again, most of what I said today are not my opinions, are stuff I heard at the fair and I thought was useful, and especially I thought it was not so present online, so I brought them here. Honestly, I can't really vouch for any of that, but I was among people who make a living out of this, who push this industry forward. So if they are credible, which I believe they are, then there is value here. Again, this whole video is a long and kaleidoscopic and convoluted thank you note. Thank you for your attention. Thanks for spending your online time here with me. It allows me incredible things like getting a press pass for the London Book Fair. So cool. Oh my god. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for choosing to spend time online with me. And if you've watched my own elevator pitch being evaluated positively, another special thank you for sharing this moment with me. I'm very proud. I hope I'm up to something. I am dedicating so much of my brain and my passion into this book. And it was a lovely opportunity to share a little bit, a tiny bit of it with you folks. I am really pumped to build this career, to follow this path. I'm inspired. Nonetheless, next video we go back to stories, to great narratives. This is not a channel about publishing, and I do not want it to be. I like my stories. A special thank you to my patrons who help this channel grow. Oh my god, I can't believe I called myself an influencer. It's just ridiculous. I will see you folks next time. Ciao, ciao.